everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of the Media Boat Podcast. In case you're looking at in case you're not watching the video and instead listening to audio, you're missing a really interesting setup. So I suggest you watch YouTube and not the unless you are listening to watching YouTube. In that case, hello. My name's Mike. His name is Matt. Wait,
My name is Matt. His name is Mike. Yeah, I don't know which direction Oh, thank you. I just got delivered a smoothie. Thank you for joining us at the Media Book Podcast for a special episode. It is March. We are mad. And it is time for brackets. You may, if you were watching this at the time it's being recorded, be participating in a NCAA college basketball March Madness bracket. If you are, you're probably very upset because it got busted this past week. And I know
busted
it
yesterday.
did. Yeah, mostly yesterday. But we're here to present you a bracket that will not be busted because we are going to be talking about something that's near and dear to our hearts. Folks, 2026 is the 30th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise. 30 years ago, in February, Pokemon Red and Green were released in Japan. And so that is the official anniversary of the franchise as a whole. Internationally, they came later. US audiences didn't get to play those games until 98. But we do the canon anniversary here. And our little way of celebrating is to do our March Madness bracket, which is something we used to do as a tradition here at the Media Vote Podcast. We kind of retired post pandemic because it kind of didn't work with our schedules, but it's back with a vengeance, and we're here with a bracket of Pokemon video games. Basically, what we did here was sorry, did you want to take it?
Yeah. What we've done here is taken the mainline Pokemon games. So you're not going to see the dungeons. You're not going to see the XDs. You're not going to see pinball here. You're not going to see Coliseum. What you're going to see is the relatively new iterations of each generational games.
Yep.
Going from red, green, blue, and yellow, all the way to the most recent release of Legends ZA. Of course, it's all in anticipation of the upcoming game, Pokemon Winds and Waves.
Yes. All
that
nine.
is the next year game.
Right, exactly. All 9 generations of Pokemon are represented here, as well as, like you said, remakes and the Legends series, which, Game Freak says is mainline, so we'll believe them. Also, they developed it. You'll notice that is the consistency through all of these games. Actually, I'm not quite sure about Let's Go Eevee Pikachu, but it's fine. That's fine.
They're
It's close enough.
Remakes.
Yeah, they're considered remakes, even though they're kind of different. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get right into it then. So you see our matchups on your screen here.
Yep.
We have randomized this.
We've randomized this. This is a single elimination game where we'll pick one winner. They'll get the 1 point in order to move on to the next round.
Exactly. So you know how this works.
Yep. So we will if you want to follow us as we go along, that's why I encourage you to watch the YouTube version of this. But
yes.
If you just want to listen to us jabber, go ahead and stick with the podcast version. So let's start the tournament here, and we're going to start at the top.
Yes.
With Pokemon Scarlet and Violet versus Legends Arceus. Couple of recent entries into the series.
Recent entries, and both games on the Nintendo Switch. So, this is going to be a little bit of a tricky one to start with because these are very different games, but with some similarities. You could even argue that Scarlet and Violet are sort of inspired by the mechanics that were introduced in Legends Arceus because it does follow Legends Arceus in release order. Yeah, this is hard to start because, I don't know which one we should probably start talking about, but, I think Legends Arceus is the interesting entry here because it was kind of a surprise when they announced it. Nobody was quite sure about what exactly it was going to be until gameplay footage was released. And The result was a game that a lot of people really, really found themselves liking. A slightly different approach to the Pokemon like mechanics. Catching, completely different. You had to basically just throw balls until you succeeded. Um, Battles were in real time, sort of, which became a standard for the Legends series. And it was in a historical time period. It was in a predated period of the Sinnoh region. All this made it a very unique experience. And I think Pokemon fans really took to it. I didn't personally love it because I didn't like how much they changed the moment to moment mechanics of Pokemon games. But its open world exploration, with different combat, I think really worked for a lot of people and it became a near and dear favorite.
Yeah, this is Legends Arceus is the one that people had speculated about what Game Freak was going to do because it wasn't a traditional mainline game, and having the Legends title meant that okay, we're breaking away from what you would normally see, and instead, like you said, went back to the past and introduced essentially a timeline variant with these kind of legendary not all
Yeah.
legendary Pokemon, but the legendary Arceus region.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely broke away from the traditional battling mechanics, which in turn created the dynamic battles that we are currently seeing with the Pokemons.
Yeah.
I don't believe Scarlet Violet had that. They were still
So, yeah, then we get
turtling.
Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet is the Taylor Swift lover of the Pokemon universe.
Hmm.
If you don't know what I mean by that, I mean it is a game with high highs and low lows. The thing about Scarlet and Violet is it is not a good looking game. You look
Hmm.
at it, the textures are kind of ugly and stretched. When it first launched, it was having severe frame rate issues that made traveling, especially through densely packed towns, really difficult. Um, on the flip side, though, from a gameplay perspective, it was fascinating. It took a lot of inspiration, like I mentioned, from Legends Arceus and played around with some of the concepts that they introduced in the previous generation with Sword and Shield and made open world exploration in like in Pokemon mainline Pokemon games really actually work. It was also paired with a story that I thought was actually really well done, with characters that were interesting and timeless. I mean, Nimona is now a classic Pokemon character. She's instantly charming and relatable. Her like need to battle constantly is such a funny way to like introduce a Pokemon character. And yeah, and there was countless memorable moments in Scarlet and Violet, and a end game that people really, really liked, plus DLC that I think really worked for people. So when you compare it to Legends Arceus, it's really a apples and oranges comparison in my mind. Unfortunately, though, Scarlet Violet's technical issues and the fact that it looks worse than Legends Arceus, a game that came out prior, definitely doesn't earn points here. And I do think, unfortunately, despite its strengths in the gameplay department, Scarlet and Violet has a hard time in this matchup.
Yeah, don't be confused that it's sitting here at number one. It's just a randomized seating. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
that we expect this to win.
no.
It just means that this was just to randomize where it fell. But yeah, it did like introduce the next iteration from the series because it came from Sun and Moon or Ultra
Mhm.
Sun and Ultra Moon to Scarlet Violet into a more open world setting, the Pokemon Champions League as well. And yeah, it had a lot of very, very kind of like I said, memorable moments. The different biomes, the traversing across the world instead of following a direct path. So yeah,
I
there was a
think
lot
we'll
of like
look,
different
yeah,
there was a lot of different unique stuff from Scarlet and Violet that, yeah, I think we'll look back and be like, okay, the turning point from the
yeah.
traditional one-on-one battles, 2-on-2 battles, to the more open dynamic battles that we currently see. But then again, like you said, following Legend Arceus, which
Yeah.
did it literally months prior to it.
So yeah, I think ultimately when Winds and Waves comes out, I think depending on what that ends up being and whether that becomes a fan favorite, we'll look back at Scarlet and Violet and be like, this had to happen for Winds and Waves to exist.
Mhm.
I mean, that's probably going to be the case. However, we're doing this bracket now in the year 2026 before that game is released. So it is very, very difficult to choose Scarlet and Violet here. So yes, I do believe Legends Arceus is the pick.
I I'm not going to argue that. So let's move on to the next section here. Black and White, both one and two, because they are direct sequels to each other, as well as the first of
Yes,
the reimagined remakes. What are we calling
sure.
these?
Both apply here.
Okay, to the original games in Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Oh boy, this one, I believe any Pokemon fan is going to be yelling at their screen about this one because this is a tough one. These are two fan favorites in the franchise. Black and White is kind of has the reputation of being one of the strongest
Hmm.
eras of Pokemon. It was released in the peak of the DS era. It had a unique graphical style that combined 3D backgrounds with 2D sprites, which made battles look more dynamic than ever before, while retaining some of that retro Pokemon appeal. It had a setting that is very memorable with Unova, which is essentially the United States. So it was really cool to see kind of like skyscrapers and urban settings in the Pokemon context. And it also had an interesting twist where it was the first Pokemon game where they're like, actually, we're going to wipe the slate clean. We're not going to include any Pokemon, at least in the first run through, any Pokemon from previous generations. You're going to get a fresh 150 that you've never seen before, and that's all you're going to see through the entire runtime of the first like campaign. It was a cool idea at the time, and I did really, really enjoy Black and White. However, it has an issue that I think a lot people ran into in this era of the Pokemon games, which was if you didn't keep up with grinding and make sure that your team was strong, it got really hard toward the end of that like journey. And I personally did struggle to get through Black and White upon its release. I understand that the sequel games, Black 2 and White 2, do have slightly different storylines. They introduce some different, like some new mechanics. But mostly we combine them here because they're so similar that it would be weird to break them out. Also, we even have a bracket of 16 if we did that. So, so
Right,
yeah,
but
we're
it's
grouping
also
them together
it's
here.
a direct sequel too. It's a part of a
Mhm.
time jump
Yeah,
of I believe it's 2 years, 4 years, 2 years
something like that.
from between the first game and then the sequel. So it's a continuation. You get to see the development of what happened from the first game and how that affected the second game, which no other Pokemon game in the series
Yeah.
has done,
And
and
also, I
well,
think
and
we
done
should,
yet.
and while we're talking about the story, we
Unless
should
you want to count
mention,
the legends, where it's like, oh, that's in
right.
the past and affects in the future, which
Yeah.
you've already played. But the legends take place after the games are there. But we're not
Yeah.
here to talk about the
No.
time flux continuum.
No, we're not. We're not for sure. And the last thing I'll mention about Black and White is that it also has one of the most memorable stories in the franchise within the central kind of antagonist slash I don't know, maybe he's right character in the franchise. Like Pokemon finally asked itself, "Hey, what are we doing?" And they put that in a character with N. And it is interesting to see a franchise kind of questions its own morality in the way that N does, with talking about should we be catching Pokemon at all? Like it's a question that I think they should visit. And the fact that they baked it into one of the main franchise entries is really cool. And kudos to Game Freak for even playing around with that idea.
Yeah, but then you have to
Yeah.
fall back on, I'm going to defeat your Pokemon with Pokemon that I captured in order to prove that we don't need to capture Pokemon.
Yeah, let's not think about it too much. It's still a video game, right? At
Right.
the end of the day. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we move from fan favorite Black and White to, of course, the first remake, as you mentioned, Fire Red Leaf Green. There's probably less to talk about here, because it was very much a remake of those original games. But I will say, it was a really good remake of those games. It modernized so much of that original format. So you had the same characters and places and music that you remember, but made to look like Ruby Sapphire and like because the bar at that point had been raised. Game Boy Advance was the platform, and you had to make it look like that kind of game. And they pulled it off. Also, Fire Red and Leaf Green are notable for having a pretty robust tutorial at the beginning. It also has a feature that I think is really cool, where when you turn on the game, it actually recaps the last things that you did. It basically says previously on Fire Red or whatever, and it says you talked to this person, got this badge in this city, and you went here. And that's really helpful for people who may be, taking breaks in between play sessions, maybe a week later and don't remember what they did. So it's a really cool quality of life feature in a game that's full of them. And it looks good and it plays well just as much as you like would want it to. In a lot of ways, it's kind of an ideal Pokemon experience for people who haven't played the series before, which makes it really cool that they just launched it on Switch. Yes, it's unfortunate that you have to pay $20 for a game that's 20 years old, but still, it's cool that it's available on a modern platform for people to play as their first Pokemon experience for the 30th anniversary, and I'm glad they did it.
Right.
So,
Except this is
yeah,
the remake of the original Red and Green.
yeah.
Uh, but like I said, upgraded graphics, and it has a unique twist to it. Yes, do note that we are only talking about the advanced version, not the new Switch 2
And but
version.
they're
But it's
the
really
same game.
it's
They're
a
the same
port.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing that Fire Red and Leaf Green did that kind of helped that they implemented further into the other games is the ability for Pokemon to follow you around. That made the journey a bit
Huh.
more personal.
That's not this one.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not. Chrissy's playing it right now. It's not this one.
I
You're
believe.
thinking of Heart Gold, Soul Silver.
No, I'm pretty sure it was Firelight Leaf Green. You can do it here
The
as well.
follow around games are Yellow, Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Can you do it in? No, you can't do it in Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire. And I think you can do it in,
Uh,
well, the 3D games,
yeah,
obviously,
the brilliant and
but
shining.
no, no, you can't do that in Fire Red Leaf Green.
I'm pretty sure you can.
Chrissy's playing it right now.
Well, she probably haven't unlocked it then.
I don't think that's true. I also own those games and played a lot of it. Anyway, regardless, it did feature a lot of cool new features. And it made it kind of the ideal way to play Red and Blue. Yes, we'll get to Let's Go later. We'll talk about that. It's a
Hmm.
separate thing. But so yeah, that makes this kind of tough. I personally am a little split about Black and White because I'm not as fond and nostalgic for it as a lot of people are. However, I can't deny the fan enthusiasm for that era, and I cannot deny that it is a well-made, good-looking video game. And Fire Red Leaf Green, while they are very streamlined versions of those first games, I just don't know if they're strong enough. And feel free to argue for it, though.
No, I mean, as much as I like the original games, and yeah, Fire Red and Fire Leaf, Fire Red and Leaf Green,
Fire
uh,
Leaf, oh no.
let's combine them. They call it Fire Leaf. As much as like they do improve on the original games and make it more enjoyable, it at the time when they came out felt like a cash grab of okay, like we want you to play this game, but we also like want to make more money and like start of trend. It's like, okay, let's recycle and then recycle. And it's like, okay, so we're just gonna get like more and more remakes. And if this game wasn't a success as much as it was, you wouldn't see those. But it
Yeah,
was. So I think that gives it a point in its favor.
I know, and it's also hard because you're talking about a remake of a game that was less than 10 years old when it came
Hmm.
out. Plus, there's the issue of, well, there's a reason why they're doing this behind the scenes. And of course, it's because that they basically you had to start your Pokemon collection over with Ruby and Sapphire because the Game Boy Advance games couldn't communicate with Game Boy games. At the time, there was no internet cloud solution like we have now with Pokemon Home. So it was literally they needed to put this game out in order for people to bring over their Pokemon from the first generation into Ruby and Sapphire if they wanted. So it was kind of solving a problem at the same time as being a remake of a video game.
Yeah, and you wouldn't get to the Wi-Fi enabled compatibility until
Yeah.
Diamond Pearl.
Yeah, until the DS,
Yeah,
because it was actually first connected to Wi-Fi. Although Fire Red Leaf Green, we should mention, came with a wireless thing for the Game Boy Advance, but it was only for direct communication to trade and battle other players. It was not for any sort of Wi-Fi. This was 2004 we're talking about.
right.
Yeah. So yeah. Um, I think I am okay with doing black and white here, just because to me it seems like that fire and leaf green were a solution to a problem and less of a strong entry in the franchise.
Right. Yeah, I will agree there. I
Mhm.
can't find any more points to Reading Fireleaf
Yeah,
here.
yeah, that's fair. That's
All right.
fair.
So let's move on then into the follow-up remake from there, Heart Gold and Soul Silver versus the Alola region of Sun and
Yeah.
Moon. And we're going to include Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon here as well.
Yes, just like we did with black and white. An interesting matchup here too, because we kind of do have again a remake facing off against a main franchise entry. So let's start with Heart and Gold, Soul Silver. Again, remakes to the original game. But what's interesting here is that they are complete reimaginings visually of those original games because of the gap in time between the releases. Obviously, Gold and Silver were Game Boy Color games, and then you have Heart Gold, Soul Silver on the DS. So you have that 3D background style that was introduced in Diamond and Pearl, which preceded it. And then, like you mentioned, it has Pokemon following trainers, which is a really cool thing that is always welcome in the series. And then also you have the fact that it's gold and silver, which are extremely strong foundations to build a remake on, because this is the game, of course, we'll talk about later when we talk about original gold silver, that have a journey and then a second journey that you don't even know is there until you finish the first one, where you get
Right.
to revisit the Kanto region. It's
Your additional post-game content that at
yes,
the time wasn't even a thought of. That was
the
like,
game,
oh, mind
yeah.
blowing.
The game seemed massive, and Heart Gold, Soul Silver make it feel even bigger because of just how much they've packed into this game. Plus, it has all the quality of life stuff that was introduced in the Diamond and Pearl era, the DS era of the games. There's, like you mentioned, Wi-Fi compatibility. There is, God, it just looks really good. It's probably, in my opinion, the sharpest looking Pokemon game sprite-wise. Like the sprites are so high quality because this is right before they went to black and white and changed the entire look of the franchise. It's really, really an impressive package. And it's definitely, there's a reason why it is the most valuable Pokemon game on the market because of just how much of a game is in these little tiny carts. It also launched with the Pokewalker, which, if you remember, was a pedometer that worked kind of like the old school Pokemon Pikachu, if you are a kid of the 90s, where you literally just walk around with it and your Pokemon that's inside actually gets experience points from that experience and can level up. It's a really cool addition that I think will be lost if this gets ever re-released. But still, it's a really cool package, which I played the crap out of. I think my copy of Soul Silver is probably the one Pokemon game I spent the most time with. I think I clocked in over 300 something hours. Bless you on that one. And so, yeah, it's definitely near and dear to my heart for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Heart Gold and Soul Silver are one of like the original Gold and Silver, like near and dear to my heart. But then again, it's always
Yeah.
my personal headcanon fan theory that your personal best Pokemon game is the one you started out with.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, so I kind of like slightly disagree with that just because so I was there from the beginning, but
Hmm.
I do prefer Johto Kanto, and honestly, we'll get there, but I really like X and Y. And so I'm a little different than that cliche. But you're not wrong, though. I think that the Gold and Silver era coming out when I was 10 years old and like peak Pokemon popularity, like definitely I do think does something to my psyche. And I do agree to a certain extent that it is why it is so near and dear to me and why I have so much love for that region and that era of games because I was the right age for it and like it hit me perfectly in the like targeted me perfectly. So yeah, I do think that it's an interesting matchup here because on the flip side, you have Sun and Moon, which are really cool, unique entries in the Pokemon canon. For the first time, these were games that didn't have the traditional Pokemon structure. There were no gyms. Instead, there were challenges, and that you had to complete along your journey through the islands of the Alola
Alola.
region.
Hmm. Yeah, the different
So,
trials on each different island.
and the trials weren't always just Pokemon battles for
Mhm.
the first time. There were some puzzle elements that kind of changed things up and made you really have to do some research and discovery by talking to people on the islands to see what even what you were going to have to do to beat that trial. Plus, it had some of the most charming Pokemon designs in recent memory. I especially have a soft spot for Comfey, the lay Pokemon,
Mhm.
and Klefki, the keys, the Ring of
Mhm.
Keys. There's just some amazing designs. Plus, any region that has Tropius is good with me. Um, and I just love the vibe of it. It's an island vibe. It looks great on the 3DS. They're really impressive looking games for that era for sure. And it took everything they learned from X and Y and kind of like made it a little different and changed up the recipe just enough to keep people interested. I do have a soft spot for uh the era of Sun and Moon, especially the anime, which was really good at that time. They changed the entire look of the series for that period of the time of the show, and I think it really holds up, and I think it really looks cool looking back at it now. So yeah, Sun and Moon has a lot going for it. So this is a really tough matchup for me. I think personally, my heart is with Heart Gold Soul Silver just because of my nostalgia for it, for the time I spent in that game. I'll be honest, I finished Sun and Moon, but it was a struggle again towards the end. But at
Right,
least I
but
can say I finished it.
yes, but okay, so Sun and Moon, if you go way back 2016, was a game that we listed as our number one game here at
Hmm.
Media Build Podcast. Sun and Moon also had a huge quality of life improvement
Yeah.
in basically getting rid of the HMs.
Yes, it was the first game where they played around with that concept. The joke, what used to be, oh, you have one HM slave that takes all your HMs and you don't actually battle with him. He's just so you can fly around. They fixed that with the modern games. That starts with Sun and Moon.
You're right. I mean, Bidoof was the true HM king.
Classic. Classic HM King, yes.
But yeah, Sun and Moon, like you said, very, very dynamic region, especially with those different islands. And I do want to give it its props and praise for breaking away from a traditional gym battle.
Oh,
But
yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
there's a lot going for it that makes it such a unique game that stands out amongst the rest of the games here. That makes me
yeah.
want to put it forward.
You're not wrong, and it is hurting me a little bit that we may
Mhm.
have to leave Heart Gold Soul Silver behind. But I do think there is a strong argument for promoting the I don't know, it's tough. Here's where I'm torn, is because it would really be unfortunate here if we didn't at least honor the fact that Gold and Soul Silver are the best remakes on this list. Because I'm looking at
Yes.
the rest of this bracket, and I don't think any of the other remakes will make it far because I think what they're up against are all stronger. However, this category has the strongest remake.
Hmm.
It's just unfortunate that it has to be again be against one of the most unique and like interesting like mainline generations of the Pokemon games. And so it's an unfortunate matchup, really, when all is said and done.
Right.
Yeah,
But yeah, let's move. I say let's move Sun and Moon forward because we
all
also need
right.
to talk about Ultra version here as well. There's just the Ultra Beasts for Sun and Moon, which we
Yeah,
haven't
I mean
talked
that
about. So there's a lot more to it
I
than Heart Gold
guess.
and Soul Silver.
Oh, it hurts though. That hurt.
And
That hurt.
it's
That one
okay.
really hurt.
We can bring it back with Gold, Silver, Crystal when we get there.
To me, Heart Gold Soul Silver is a finalist. That's why this hurts.
You
But
want to switch it? We can switch it. It's our bracket.
no, because you're right. I can't deny what the argument that you put in. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I do think that's fair. But yeah, it's definitely this is a painful one for me.
Well, okay. If Heart Gold, Soul Silver were to move on, they would
Mhm.
face the winner of this next matchup in
Right.
the most latest entry, Legends ZA
Yeah.
versus personal favorites X and Y.
Yes. All right. So you get the field here. Sell me on Legends ZA. Tell me why
It
it
is
could win.
very, very hilarious that these two are matched up together because
Yes, they are.
Legends EA is
Yes.
the Legends version of X and Y.
It is in the same region of Kalos, right?
Yes.
Kalos.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it is
And
interesting to see them matched up here.
yeah, whereas Legends is what we're talking about Legends right now, ZA is set entirely within the city of Lumios,
Mhm.
where you get to run around and different biomes open up as the days progress. It has a really unique system of challenging between ranking from Z all the way to rank A. Yes, you don't actually fight all 26 battles. I wish you
Yeah,
did.
don't worry about
I wish there kind of was an option to be like, okay, you can do this if you want, or you can
it.
skip it.
Right.
But unfortunately, that's not the case. So it does do the massive 20-point jump. But that being said, there's a lot more dynamic abilities that you have running around in Legends ZA. You're running up and down buildings. You're jumping between buildings, something that's not really taken in Pokemon games. You're able to essentially like hover and fly and glide around within the city, not just jumping from point to point to point on a
Yeah.
map. Everything is very dynamic in both a day and night cycle. Everything is very dynamic in both the different Pokemon that appear depending on the time and depending on the
Yeah.
place as well.
Yeah.
It's and it introduces a lot of additional mega forms that both X and Y are known for, where they introduce the mega mechanic into the
Yeah.
game. A fan favorite and staple of the not just the Pokemon trading card game, but the Pokemon championship games as well.
Yeah.
You're always wondering, are they going to go mega in there? And this is where they both began.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's really cool stuff going on in ZA. You didn't even mention the fashion.
Oh yes, all the different fashions. Every now and then, I will just be like, okay, let's change it up because it gives me a free fashion change. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
love it.
And yeah, this all makes an interesting matchup, like you said, because so much of what makes Legends ZA cool is in debt to X and Y. As you mentioned, the Mega Evolutions introduced in the X and Y generation, really cool at the time. It kind of became a running joke for a little bit there. We didn't even talk about the Z moves in Sun and Moon, but there used to be like a
Well, we could
recurring
add it
thing.
next time then.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was funny at the time because every Pokemon game after X and Y had to have some sort of gimmick. There was like
Hmm.
a joke where it's like, oh, what thing are we going to wear that's going to give our Pokemon something to do that they haven't been able to do before? Whether it be Gigamax in Sword and Shield, or the Z moves in Sun and Moon, or most recently with the terrestrialization in Scarlet and Violet.
Hmm.
But that starts here with Mega Evolutions, and arguably they got it right the first time, folks. Like Mega Evolutions are the coolest and the most enduring because they're just so simple. They're like, what if you could just basically digivolve? Let's be real, that's what this is.
Yes, because it's not a permanent
It's not
evolution. It's
permanent, right?
you don't
It's
have to
just
go
for the
back.
battle, and it gives you new abilities, and
Hmm.
you have a slightly different look. It's a digivolve.
Yes,
Let's say the facts. But it's cool that it's there, and yeah, it is telling that Legend ZA brings it back, because of how enduring it is. And then X and Y also introduced being able to customize your outfit. It was the
hmm
first game to have buying and customization for your trainers, which was, of course, a near and dear to my heart. It was also a 3DS game that actually took advantage of the 3D. Later 3DS entries, including Sun and Moon, did not have 3D featured. It did, of course, make the frame rate take a huge hit, though. And so that may be why they retired it. But for the time, it was cool to have a 3D Pokemon game. Speaking of 3D, it was also the first fully polygonal 3D Pokemon game. It was a generational leap when you consider that Black and White was the generation that preceded it. It looked completely different. It established Pokemon 3D models for every Pokemon, and that is now the standard moving forward. And it starts with X and Y. So yeah, this is an interesting one because on the flip side of that argument, X and Y also has a reputation of being the one for babies among fans. I
hmm
don't think fans liked how easy they appeared to be when they were released. People didn't love the Pokemon designs at the time. Also, they felt that it was a streamlined experience that lost a lot of the dungeons and puzzle stuff that kind of ends with the black and white games. Um, so you have a lot of people saying that this is a turn for the worse for the franchise because it introduced a lot of things that people don't necessarily like about modern Pokemon games. Um, However, I think it has an extremely memorable story. I think the look of it is really great. I love the characters that are introduced in this game. And I like how it's basically about a Pokemon apocalypse. And it's one of the games that it given us a little peek into Pokemon history, including this great war that apparently happened, and a character who is like maybe 1,000 years old for all we know, which returns in ZA, even older. So yeah, it's like it's a fascinating game story wise, and like because of how much of a transitional game it is. Yeah, but it is controversial, and I think it does have some points against it that maybe ZA can't necessarily say for it. But it is a mainline Pokemon game, unlike ZA, and so if you really, it almost depends on your own personal taste between these two.
Right. I don't want to make sure that we're clear here that we're not talking about the Pokemon series attached to these games because the XY series is one of the strongest in the
Oh, it's my
Pokemon
favorite.
series.
It's my personal favorite just because I love Serena's storyline.
Mhm.
It's so moving. I really love the journey that she goes on in those series. But you're right. We're not talking about the anime. So it does not affect the results here.
Right. But yeah, I think despite all of its negatives, like you said, X and Y established a lot of what made going forward from it very unique to Pokemon, like the different, mega evolutions,
Mhm.
still a mainstay here. The open world, the different 3Ds, getting away from being sprite based to
Mhm.
a full-fledged model.
But
Uh,
if you're one of those people who are still bitter about experience share, well, then I
Oh, you
don't
can
know if
turn
I
it
can.
off if you want.
No, remember X and Y
I
is
mean,
when they start being its default.
don't.
I think I do. I think you're
You
right
can
though. I
turn it
think you
off.
can turn it off, but
Yeah.
it is on by default when you start the game,
Mhm.
and that pissed a lot of people off. And so yeah,
Yeah, but I see that as a quality of life improvement.
I also do. I That's one of the reasons why I love it, X and Y, because it was easier. This was a Pokemon game I was able to beat very easily compared to the two, three generations that preceded it. So yeah, this is a tough one for me personally. I would choose X and Y here, but you have made a very strong argument for ZA, so I'm gonna leave this to you here.
I am going to go with X and Y because it's the
Okay.
game that made me get the 3DS.
Hey, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay,
That's
okay.
fair.
Technically, it wasn't, but it was a good addition to it.
Also, it's tough with recency bias for ZA,
Yes.
so we maybe need to wait until the dust settles a bit to really judge that one.
Okay, so here's your big negative point against Legend ZA.
Yeah.
I still haven't finished the campaign because I keep going off and doing all the different side quests, which
I
is
mean, that
great for
actually sounds
it.
like a selling point, right? Like, because
Right.
it means that you're having so much fun, you want to do everything.
Yeah, but it's also deterring me from going back because it
Mm.
makes me care less and less and less about the main story.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right.
All right.
X and Y
So
moves on.
X and Y moves on. So we have our first side of the brackets in our Elite Eight. Now we go to
All
the
right.
other side, starting
Yes.
with Sword and Shield versus Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Everyone
Yes.
forgets about Crystal. Don't forget
Crystal.
about Crystal.
Don't forget about Crystal. This might be the easiest matchup we've seen so far. Sword and Shield, don't get me wrong, are interesting games. They're the
Mhm.
first Switch mainline Pokemon games. They look great. I honestly think they look better than Scarlet and Violet. I think the animation and design of the characters are really, really strong in Sword and Shield, but it's more of a linear game. It's not as open world as the generation that preceded it or the that followed it. And the wild areas that are in the game are very rudimentary compared to what we would get in Scarlet Violet. They are the introduction of the form and not necessarily great because of it. But that was an innovation at the time, and I give it points for that for sure. I also give it points for having a semi-memorable story. Mostly the character, like the gym leaders, are memorable. I loved the whole like soccer arena vibe of when you would go into a gym battle and that
Hmm.
like chanting would start. It was really cool at the time. These are also the pandemic Pokemon games, so they're really memorable because a lot of us were just home playing the Switch, um, playing through Sword and Shield while
Hmm.
we couldn't do anything else. So that part also just context of the time gives it some strength there. But overall, it is really hard to argue for Sword and Shield when you have arguably, like we mentioned when you're talking about its remakes, one of the strongest generations of the Pokemon series, which is Gen 2 Johto. I mean, let's be real. Gold, Silver were a revelation when they came out. This was taking the Pokemon like formula that was introduced in Red and Blue and making it arguably perfecting the like perfecting it the second time out. Like you can even play those games now, and I believe they pretty much hold up. This introduced two new types, and introduced like the dark and steel types
Steel.
that are now
Hmm.
standard. It, like we said, had a whole second journey where you return to Kanto at the end of the game, which was, again, a revelation at the time. I don't think people even really knew it was going to happen until it was
Hmm.
happening. It had some really strong Pokemon designs that still hold up, like Lugia and Ho-Oh, for example, the legendary dogs,
Hmm.
which also was a really interesting mechanic because you had to seek them out. They would change locations all the time. You had great, memorable gym battles. We're not going to be talking about Whitney's Miltank. Uh,
Don't worry, we'll roll that over.
yeah, this is, I hate rollout so much. But yeah, it's like they're really memorable again, partially because we're millennials and we were the right age for it, but also because of, again, how much they strengthened an already strong concept. They are probably one of the best sequels in video game history, just because of how much they refined and simplified and like made the existing Pokemon mechanics even better than they already were.
Yeah, we mentioned it
So,
with the remake of Soul
yeah,
of Heart and Soul that
right.
it allowed you to have that second complete second journey,
Hmm.
complete surprise second journey that unless you
Yeah.
finish the main story, you didn't completely know about that.
Yeah.
Um, it also introduced for the first time the different types of Pokeballs with the acorn balls,
Yep.
which became a mainstay of the fastball, the net ball, the
Yes.
the repeat ball, the luxury ball. All those can point right directly to gold, silver, and crystal games.
Yeah. They set a lot of standards, I think, which makes them feel very foundational in the series.
It was also the first one to bring in a third entry. Before,
Uh,
especially in the
well,
US, we had red. Well, I
you're
guess
forgetting yellow.
I'm forgetting yellow, but yellow was a twist on it where
It will,
Chris was, yes,
yeah,
I get where you're
I get what
saying,
you're
but yes,
saying. Crystal, they established that the third game in the franchise was going to be basically a greatest hits. Like not a
yes.
greatest hits. There was going to be basically the deluxe edition where it was going to
Hmm.
be like, here's the game that you already probably played, but better with new features. Like Crystal was interesting for two reasons. It was a Game Boy Color only cart, so you could only play it on Game Boy Color, and it had better graphics as a result. And then two, it was the first Pokemon game to let you play as a female trainer, which of course would become standard after that. So strong entry here. And even though I personally like the remakes more, we've already eliminated them. So I do think this is our chance to give kudos to Gen 2.
Well, yes.
Sword Shield, though, don't sleep on it. If you didn't play it, maybe go back and try it out, especially if you didn't love Scarlet and Violet. It's a little bit more linear and more predictable, but it's still a strong Pokemon experience that still looks really good.
Yeah, we're not saying that Sword and Shield is bad by any means.
No.
We're just saying that
Also,
what Gold, Silver, and Crystal introduced to Pokemon
yeah.
is way outweighs it into its favor.
And also, shout out to Gigantamax Pikachu, that little chubby boy. It's great.
Gigantamax Waylord. If you thought he couldn't get any bigger, he does.
Gigantamax Wailord is too big. Too big.
All
All
right.
right.
Speaking of too big, we got to talk about two big games here.
Hmm. Hmm.
Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire versus The originals, red, green, blue, and yellow.
So, hmm, this is a hard one, personally, and this is why. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are not great remakes of Ruby and Sapphire. I do think they are better than the originals. I do think there are enough improvements to make them worthwhile, but they do feel a little regressive when you consider that X and Y came out before them. And what I mean by that is you can't customize your trainers. They're back to the default trainers that they were in the original games, just 3D models. The graphics don't look quite as good, in my opinion. They brought the characters back down to a kind of more chibi style, for lack of a better term, than the X and Y characters. So you lose a little bit of that style. But beyond that, there are Ruby and Sapphire. And if you like Gen 3, they're the best ways to play Gen 3. The graphics are pretty good. The battle stuff looks amazing. It's a 3DS game again that doesn't use the 3D feature, but it's
Mhm.
still a good looking 3DS game. Um, so yeah, I do think they're interesting as like kind of like a way to experience the Gen 3 without having to break out a Game Boy Advance. But as remakes, I just wasn't super impressed by what I got. On the
Yeah,
flip side, though, we have the originals. You have
the ones that started it all.
the ones that started it all.
The
There's
reason
a
we're doing
lot.
this, red and green, 30 years ago.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the thing that's, I think, the only negative I can really think about this is that they are the first ones, which means that they are lacking so many quality of life things that are even introduced in their remakes, which we talked about already.
Mhm.
You are going back to a very archaic experience if you're going back to these original Game Boy games. There are multiple types that are not in there. There's no distinction between physical and special moves. That wouldn't come until Gen 4, if you can believe it. There are a lot of items, and like you mentioned, the custom Pokeballs are not here yet. It is hard, I think, now to go back to those original games because of just how much they've refined the experience over 30 years. So that's probably the biggest negative. But if you're going in just for nostalgia, there's a lot of nostalgia to be had here. The original sprite work is really cool looking back at. The way that those games are written is so different than the modern approach. It's just very simple. It's a very simple RPG, very good for beginners. Um, and maybe the purest form of the Pokemon experience you can get.
Yeah, but like you said, we're gonna talk about these as they came out too, with
Yeah.
red and green being Japan, especially green
Hmm.
being Japan exclusive, and then red and blue being US, with yellow having a combined and the only game where you could get all the original starters plus Pikachu. Basically the retelling of the Pokemon anime
Yeah,
in
which makes
sprite
Yellow
form.
unique
Mhm.
in the canon because it is the only game that even acknowledges that the anime exists in the main series.
Yes.
So it is interesting as like kind of a time capsule. It is very 1999. Like it is very
Yes.
like, oh, we have a hit. Basically, they all realized at the same time, and they were like, oh, well, people like these characters. We should put these characters in. So it has like Jesse and James of Team Rocket in the game, for example. They're neat. And also, if you had the same experience I did, kids my age were covetous of this game and didn't let anybody else touch it.
Hmm.
I don't think I ever played. I don't think I've ever actually played Yellow because I had friends that had it that never let me play it.
Well, yeah, they don't want you ruining their game
Yeah, no, it
and
was
their
it was
experience.
precious, it turns
Yeah.
out. But yeah, I think Gen 1 has a lot going for it, but most of it is because it's the first time.
Hmm.
And I think those Gen 1ers, to borrow a term, the people who believe that the first 150 are the best 150 and that's never gotten better from here, I just think they need a wake up call. A lot of good Pokemon is waiting for them if they just gave it an open heart and accepted it into them. But this matchup for me, the nostalgia might win. I don't
I
know.
I think that there's a lot of stuff they did right out of the gate, especially with the linking of the games that you have
Hmm.
separate games that made you want to trade. It wasn't a solo experience. And having that
Yeah.
from the get-go and not introducing it down the line, being like, oh, why do I have to get two games now. Why do I used to do it before? Like just one game and
Yeah,
done. That because
it's
it's done
yeah.
from the outset and it helped build a community of Pokemon that people could talk about. Oh, did you catch this? Can I trade with you? Do you have a link cable? Do you have batteries for your Game Boy?
Right. Yeah, no,
That
you're right.
there's
It,
a
it
lot of stuff
established,
that it established for the games going forward that
yeah,
made it more of a community and more of a phenomenon that I think it otherwise would be.
you're right. You're 100% right. I do think the connectivity is in the DNA of the franchise. It always has been, and it starts here. That link cable is key to its success. And yeah, I think that ultimately, as interesting as Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are of remakes of Gen 3, it's hard not to just give it to the OGs here and like at least let Red and Blue move on for now.
For now, because Ruby
Yes.
and Sapphire are still to come.
Oh yeah,
But
we'll talk about them.
before we get there, we have
Hmm.
another matchup. Let's go
Yes.
to talk about the Let's Go version
Yeah.
of Pikachu and Eevee versus, I'll say it, one of the strongest contenders on this list, Diamond,
Uh-huh.
Pearl, and Platinum.
Okay. So I have not played Let's Go Pikachu Eevee beyond the first 10 minutes. Have you played more?
I have not,
Okay. So we really don't have a whole lot to talk about here,
which is
but it's
okay
fine.
because we just talked a whole lot about
Yeah.
the original games, which is
Yeah.
kind of what the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevees are.
What I will say is that it's interesting that they tried this. This is quite an interesting experiment in the Pokemon series. They were basically like, "Hey, we're to the point where a lot of people maybe didn't play Red and Blue or even Fire Red Leaf Green because of how much time has passed. The Switch is big. Let's put a Switch version of those games out, but let's change it up." The influence, of course, here is Pokemon Go, the mobile game that we're not talking about explicitly here, but is kind of a specter that haunts the modern Pokemon game. It exists. The Pokemon Company is aware of it, but they rarely address it. But here is the time that it comes into play. They literally borrow the Pokeball mechanic from Pokemon Go and put it into a mainline Pokemon game to mixed results. I do think that there were people who really liked that kind of catching approach where Pokeballs felt like a currency and you're just kind of chucking them at anything. And there are people who didn't like that and were very staunchly like, no, this is not a classic Pokemon game. I am not interested. But it's not the only thing that makes it a compelling experience. From what I understand, also, they're really charming looking games. The graphics are unique in the series. It is similarly in that chibi style that I mentioned with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but because of the Switch's horsepower, it looks really cool. And I like the designs of the Pokemon in it. I like the character designs. It's a really cool way to experience Kanto if you haven't experienced Kanto. It's just hinges on whether you like the catching mechanic or not because of how different it is than those original games. So they're interesting here. But you're right. There's no argument here because up against it is the fourth generation of Pokemon, which is the fan favorite. I mentioned that Black and White is a fan favorite, but does not hold a candle to how much the fans love Diamond and Pearl. This was the first DS entry. It took basically the refinement that they did in Ruby and Sapphire and refined it even further, such as, I don't know, cutting a gem, you could say. And it made them such a streamlined, interesting experience. However, it's also maybe the peak of difficulty in the series, which is why I think a lot of people like it so much. These fans are begging for like an adult Pokemon experience for some stupid reason. I don't know why they want this. And Diamond and Pearl arguably deliver that. It's a really tough end game with some of the most complicated dungeon puzzles in the series, with some of the hardest gym battles in the series, with some of the most esoteric designs. You mentioned Bidoof, like some weirdos in this lineup for sure. But because of the DS and the DS's popularity, this was probably a lot of people's entry into the Pokemon's franchise and probably hit a lot of people in the fandom right at that sweet spot that you mentioned earlier. And that's why I think that their popularity soars through the roof. Personally, I was in high school and I was
Oh, you're showing your age here.
interested. Yeah, I know. And I was maybe not ready for how hard those games were going to be. And I really struggled with Diamond and Pearl. Of course, we're not even mentioning Platinum, which of course is the third game that takes everything, refines it even further, is has way more features, has an entire extra mode, like championship mode. I'm forgetting the
Mhm.
term for that was introduced in Emerald but brought into Platinum. And it really is known now as kind of the peak Pokemon experience. Like if you want to play a full featured huge Pokemon adventure, Platinum is the one to try. It's also extremely expensive. So good luck at trying to find a cheap copy of Pokemon Platinum now. Um, but you're right. This matchup is very much a landslide.
Yeah, this is probably the only one-sided matchups that we have here. And that's nothing to say about the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee franchise.
Yeah.
It's just the strength of Diamond and Pearl and Platinum and what it did for the series going forward, especially with, like I said, the different traders. This is the introduction of
Yeah.
Cynthia, too, a mainstay in the
Fans
Pokemon
love
games.
Cynthia for all sorts of reasons. Ooh, boy.
But yeah, Diamond and Pearl will be moving on.
Yes, yes,
But that
yes.
brings us to our last matchup in these entry rounds. And oh, if you didn't get enough of Diamond and Pearl, well, we have Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl going up against Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald.
uh, water. Hey, do you like water?
You like surfing around? Like Kyogre?
Well, you better. Before we talk about Gen 3, I'll talk about Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl real briefly. This was maybe the most backlash I've ever seen to a Pokemon game ever upon release. Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl are Switch remakes of the DS games, and fans did not like it when it was released. I think they didn't like the graphic changes that they made. I think they didn't like that it was pretty bare bones of a remake. It barely had new features. It was very much those original games, just ported almost with a new graphical style. And I think that was really severely disappointing. Of course, following the trend that I mentioned was introduced in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, where suddenly between Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and these modern remakes, they decided that the remakes are more of just perfunctory and less of the perfection of the games that preceded it. And so the ultimate example of that, it seems, is Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, where we're getting diminishing returns from these remakes. So that's why I thought it was so funny that right after this, people were begging on their knees for remakes of Black and White, because I'm like, they're just going to be bad. Like, because what we've been proven now is that they're caring less and less about these remakes when they put them out. Of course, just like Ruby and
That's
Sapphire,
why
I
they
have to
stopped making the
mention,
remakes after them.
yeah, I guess so. They might be done. But yeah, I think that's why similarly to Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, the same thing applies here. If you didn't play those original games and you have a Switch, then maybe this is a way to play them, but maybe not even like those games. I don't know if it's the best way to play them. It's definitely a way to play those games, but your mileage may vary. And of course, then Ruby and Sapphire. So I'm curious, what's your experience with Gen 3? Were you there from day one?
I was there from day one. I was very interested in the different dynamics of each game. That you got away from just a Team Rocket baddie, and you
Hmm.
had the Team Magma and Team
Yeah.
Aqua in the two different games, and you had to basically choose which one do I want to fight. And then when you got to the end, it's okay, which one am I really siding with at the end there too? Which created a completely new, different level of playing the game because it was less about like just okay, beat the bad guys and more. You have to make a
Yeah.
choice now. Where your allegiances lie within a Pokemon game? I mean, and
Mhm.
then Emerald comes out and, like I said, refines it, refines everything. So I lots of love to Sapphire, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and let's not forget here. I believe this is also where we had the first introduction of team battles, double battles, which
Yes,
became
double battles are
a
here. Yeah.
forever staple in the Pokemon
Hmm.
franchise.
For sure. And changed up the strategy of Pokemon battles and
Mhm.
introduced moves that help your ally as opposed to just attack your opponent.
Yep.
It did change the meta, I think, of Pokemon battles forever, and is still you can feel that impact. Yeah, no, Gen 3, I was also on board from day one. I had the pre-order with the coin that came with it. It was such a big deal for me. I remember being very excited for those games. And yeah, it was definitely felt like a generational leap. They looked better, they played better, and the music is super memorable with all those blaring horns. And as we mentioned, water, a lot of water in the
Mhm.
region. You had to surf a lot. But yeah, it's a memorable generation. For me, it's not super high in my ranking. I liked it at the time, but I think as I got older, I saw kind of like stuff I didn't love about it that got better as the series went on. It's also interesting because this is the first clean break, as I mentioned earlier in the game, where you couldn't move your Pokemon over from the
Mhm.
Game Boy games that preceded it, which meant that, yeah, you were mostly starting from scratch with everyone with Gen 3. I didn't
Yeah,
play
but
Emerald, but like I said, Emerald and Platinum have that in common where they're very popular Pokemon games just because of how much content they pack into that cart. And yeah, it was really cool to see them do as much as they did with Emerald.
yeah, it was also the first introduction of something outside of traditional Pokemon battles, where they brought in the Pokemon contests.
Yes, contests were a big deal too, and it was cool. I kind of wish there was a way to like maybe only do contests for people who just don't want to play the main
Hmm.
game. But the fact that it was there at all is, like you said, a cool addition and made it feel like the Pokemon universe was wider than just battling. It made it feel like a lived-in place where people do all sorts of things with their Pokemon companions. And that's really cool. And it does have lasting implications for the rest of the games. So yeah, I think here this is also kind of an easy pick. I think Gen 3 moves on, despite, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl being remakes. I just think yeah, they don't really hold a candle to that feeling of Gen 3.
Right, and that fan backlash, like I said, diminishing
Yeah.
returns. We knew we were going to get there. I just didn't feel like we were going to get there so quickly.
Hmm.
All right, but what
All
this
right.
does mean, though, is that none of the remakes moved on.
I know, like I said, that's what I told you was going to happen, is because the
Yes.
strongest one here is Heart Gold Soul Silver. So if that didn't make it, none of them make it. But that means we have quite a round of quarterfinals to get to. The rest of this is going to go faster because we don't have to introduce the games anymore. So
Mhm.
the second hour of the show is going to be a breeze. Trust me.
Yeah. The second hour just get straight to the finals because we're going
We're
to
going to
start
get
right
straight
at the
to the
top
finals
here
here.
with Legends Arceus versus Black and White 1 and 2.
Uh, Whenever the Legends games come up, this is tough because, like I said, kind of an apples and oranges
Mhm.
comparison. They're very different games mechanically. So really, this depends on you because you've played a lot more of the Legends games than I have. Do you think Legends Arceus really has a chance against Black and White here?
I think Legends Arceus has a really, really unique and strange concept that will
Yeah.
throw people for a loop when they first start up the game. That I believe Black and White 2 also deals with time travel as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's funny too.
with
Yeah.
yeah, Palkia and Dalkia. And yes, God is introduced in Black and White.
Yeah, Arceus, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Arceus
Well,
is
just
both
what,
of these games. It's fun.
yes, it's fun how that kind of matches up there. The
Yeah.
Arceus bracket.
Right.
So yeah, the Legend series I think like was so unique and so a fresh of breath air. That's
Fresh of
mainly
breath
why
air.
it moves on. Yes, yes, it was precious breath air, breath of fresh air
There you go. You're not
that
wrong.
no that when it was announced and shown and people got a chance to play it, they're like, wow, this is what Pokemon can be going forward. That it didn't have to be contained to one-on-one battling, 2v2 battling, the dynamicness of it, the the dynamic battling where you don't have to jump into an actual battle, that it can get there, but you can also just run around and knock out Pokemon and gain experience that way. That
Yeah,
it definitely gave the Pokemon series a brand new mechanic that, love it or hate it, I think is still here to stay.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that's a pretty strong argument, but it is so different. And I think that that's again
Different can
becomes
be good though.
almost, yeah, but this almost becomes kind of a your tastes kind of thing factor
Mhm.
in here because I just am somebody who just didn't click with the Legends formula. It didn't work for me. I thought the game was interesting. I played like a handful of hours of it, but I just didn't like the moment to moment gameplay as much as I do like the classic Pokemon structure. And so that provided a challenge for me. And I can't imagine I'm the only person who had that experience. But the Legends games have proven to be very popular and are very successful. So I might be in the minority there, which is fair. However, we do need to talk about just the monolith that is Black and White. Again, for all the reasons we already talked about,
Mhm.
the storyline being as memorable, the game calling out its own morality, like the graphic style being completely new, them being willing to start people fresh with a whole set of Pokemon that they'd never seen in a brand new region was really cool at the time. Um, for DS games, they're very impressive, and they did kind of usher in a renaissance of sorts for the franchise. You could argue that starts with Diamond and Pearl, but I think that really it peaks with Black and White. I recall a lot of people in my life in college at the time, again, we're dating ourselves, um, that got back into Pokemon because of Black and White. If you ask, like, in fact, it's kind of become a running joke if you ask a celebrity what their favorite Pokemon game is, they say Black and White. I think Timmy Chalamet says that he loved Black and White. It's again hits, I think, the generation in a perfect zone that I think it is a seminal Pokemon game. Um, and I do get it. Like, even though they're not my favorites, it's such a cool era of the Pokemon franchise that it's really hard to ignore here. So I don't know. This is tough for me. I am leaning towards Black and White over Legends, just but I might be biased. So I don't know. I think this might have to be your call.
I loved what Legends did, and I love that Legends allows the Pokemon and Game Freak and the Pokemon mainlines to be able
Mm.
to branch off, to be able to
Yeah,
try new things.
yeah.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least they're doing it in a relatively safe space that says, okay,
Yeah,
we're going to try it over here. We'll take what works, takes what doesn't, and bring it over to the mainstay in Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. What I will give it a big point against is that the open worlds, while great, feel very, very, very wide open. The difference between the regions is very, very vast, and at times
mhm.
can feel a little bit too much of a slog getting between one another until you get the flyability, you can like just zip around. Whereas with Black and White, like you mentioned,
Yeah,
the moment-to-moment gameplay from region to region, from town to town, from city to city, it works. It flows. There's never a dull moment, and the story in it, and there's a reason it's the only game here that got a direct sequel. I mean,
yeah.
yes, technically ZA is a sequel, but
And
not really.
Ultra, yeah, but you could make that
Yes,
argument.
Ultra.
But yeah, you're not wrong. It's like the one story that was strong enough for them to want to continue it, which is very telling.
Hmm. So yeah, I think Black and White 1 and 2 will move forward to
That's
the
close though.
final four.
I feel that that was close though, so that's good. I'm glad that
Yes,
you made a really strong argument for Legends. So it's honored to be here. I
yes.
think.
But now we
But
go
yeah,
from the Arceus bracket to
to the
the
3DS
3DS
bracket.
bracket. With
All
Sun and
right.
Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon versus X and Y. And
Yeah.
sadly, no Z did not get that
No,
third
we didn't get
entry.
a Z. Okay. I have to be honest here. I love X and Y. They're probably my favorite Pokemon
Oh no, don't
games.
start off that way. Oh no.
However,
There it is. Oh,
I have to admit, I cannot really argue against Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon takes
I mean,
everything that
you
X and Y
can.
did.
You'll lose,
Yeah,
but
I
you
know, I
can.
can, but it's going to be an uphill battle, and I know that. And I'm being honest with myself here.
Mhm.
Sun and Moon take everything that X and Y introduced, and well, besides Mega Evolutions, because they get ditched for Z moves, but they take the DNA basically of X and Y and everything that it did well and make it better and introduce a completely new way of like doing the Pokemon game. They look amazing. The vibes of Alola are immaculate. The new ways of doing trials instead of gym leaders and being able to tackle them in any order is a really cool innovation that changes the Pokemon games from there on. The characters are memorable, And you do have customization just like X and Y. It's a little less features, but you can change your hat, which is neat. Uh, there's stuff, there's a lot of stuff in Sun and Moon that makes it really hard to argue that X and Y are better games. There, Sun and Moon brings back the difficulty. It brings back the challenge that I think Pokemon fans wanted after X and Y. They're almost a corrective step. And they're clearly Game Freak trying new things and trying to modernize the Pokemon franchise in real time, which is not something they do a lot. And so they're unique in the canon because of that. And I think we should honor that here. As much as I love X and Y, I can admit that a lot of that is irrational when compared to Sun and Moon.
Now, the one thing against Sun and Moon is the introduction of Ultra Beasts. Whether you love them or whether you
Yeah.
hate them, whether they count as Pokemon or whether they're their own separate dimension, is
Yeah.
really up to you. But
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't play the
they
Ultra games, so I don't have a horse in that race. I don't have a
yeah,
horsey in that race.
but you can capture a Ultra Beast in a Pokeball. The Ultra Beasts are in the meta. They're in the card games. They
Mhm.
show up every now and then. Celestia, the hugest thing there is, and not to be outdone though, but Sun and Moon, legendary Pokemon, and Solgaleo and Laluna,
And
were evolutions. They weren't just straight up deities.
yeah, which makes it a little complicated when you talk
Yeah.
about that kind of what legendaries are. But like,
Hmm.
you know what? I don't think those stuff matter, especially in a one-to-one matchup here. Ultimately, even talking about that stuff brings to light just how complicated and interesting Sun and Moon is as a generation compared to X and Y. I mean, when you talk about X and Y, what are you talking about? You're talking about, oh, I can move my stylus to pet my Pokemon. Like the stuff that the innovation in X and Y does not hold a candle to the innovation and level that they were operating on with Sun and Moon, in my opinion. You need X and Y to make Sun and Moon, but I think Sun and Moon are the games that they really put their heart into and really pushed into the modern era. And to me, I think that Sun and Moon takes it here.
I mean, X and Y though, it introduces that mega concept though.
Yeah,
It and that heavily bolsters what X and Y does. Again,
that's
in
true.
addition to the Pokemon War, that
Yeah.
overarching like story within X and Y.
Right. You don't have as much lore. Well, you do, but like because
Kind
you were
of.
talking about the Ultra Dimension and stuff,
Yeah.
you do have lore going on in Sun and Moon. It's just very different feeling. Also, we're not going to go into the whole storyline between what's the girl's name, the blonde
Lily.
girl, Lily and her mom and all that
Yes.
toxic relationship that they have. We don't have time to open that can of worms. Yes, you're not wrong. X and Y probably has the better story. But when you're talking about story, it's still not as good as the black and white story, and whatever wins this is going to have to face black and white. So maybe we should leave story on the back burner here,
All right.
because it's kind of a moot point.
It will become a moot point, but
Yeah,
I think Sun and Moon has a lot more going for it
yeah, I think so.
as much as X and Y does.
Right. So I think Sun Moon moves on.
Yep. And that brings us to Gen 1 versus Gen 2.
Ooh, yeah, Game Boy Color battle here. Game Boy
Yes.
Color.
Gold, silver, and crystal versus red, blue, green, and yellow.
I'm sorry. Kill your nostalgia. Gold and silver wins. I'm sorry. I'm
Oh, yeah.
sorry. I'm not a Gen 1er. I've never been. I think Gen 1, obviously, being the original games, very important. But important does not mean they're games I want to play. And Gold and Silver introduced enough stuff into the formula that they are way more playable in the modern day than I think those original games are. Sure, yes, there are charming things about that first generation. Like I said, the sprite design, the nostalgia, like things like the vibes that were left behind in future games. There's something to be gleaned there. But ultimately, gold, silver, and crystal are hard to deny just because of what we talked about before, like how much bigger they feel, how many like series mainstays were introduced here, and like how much of an enduring legacy the Johto generation has. Like it's still people are begging to return to Johto, and we already got remakes of these games, but that's just how strong people's nostalgia and feelings are towards that generation. And we'll always have Kanto. Kanto will be back forever, every 10 years until Game Freak is sick of giving us Kanto again. Um, but Gold and Silver are just the better games, and it's really, really hard not to like to argue against
And if you really, really love the Kanto region, guess what?
it.
It's in gold and silver.
Yeah, it's in Gold and Silver. That's
Go
the
there.
hard. That's the hardest thing here is that the entirety. Well, not that's not 100% true
Yes.
because speaking of time jumps, the thing about the second journey, the return to Kanto and Gold and Silver, is that there's a time jump. It's actually one
Mhm.
of the most fascinating things they did about that. You are not just playing the same game. Instead, things have changed in Kanto. Entire cities look different. There's an entire different gym battle because Koga has retired and his sister has taken over the gym. It's cool that they were willing to take those swings. Where like, oh yeah, no, time has passed, and we're gonna prove that like things are different now in Kanto. It's a cool concept, and yeah, but on its face, yes, it's hard to say. Well, the game that is inside this other game win.
Yeah, it's hard to say when you have this, like I said, there's so much additional stuff that they added in gold and silver from the
Yeah.
base games that made not just different waves within the Pokemon world, pun definitely
Mhm.
intended there for what's coming, uh, but also established that we can introduce more into this world. We can introduce new concepts to this world and again play with that formula going forward. That if Gold and Silver didn't hit the highs that it had, you probably don't have everything following it because
Yeah.
Pokemon might have died right there.
Yeah, I mean, those first games were really popular, but I think Gold and Silver cemented them as an important franchise for gamers to like pay attention to.
Mhm.
Because yeah, you're right. There could have been a universe in which Red and Blue were one-offs, but Gold and Silver proves that that wasn't the case. And yeah, we're indebted to it. So yeah, I definitely think Gold and Silver moves on.
All right, so Gold and Silver and Crystal, can't forget about Crystal,
Yes,
will
can't
move
forget.
on. And that
All
brings
right.
us to the other ones, Gen 3, Gen 4. Uh,
Yep.
Diamond, Pearl, Platinum versus Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald.
Okay,
This
I'll
is a
be
close one.
honest. Uh Maybe, but I'll be honest here. I feel very similarly about Gen 3 and Gen 4. I
Mhm.
think they are both games that were challenging for me when I played them. I think they're both games that I was like, kind of like, can I just go back to JoJo? I didn't love them. I'll be honest. This is kind of the tough middle children for me in the Pokemon franchise. But I realize that the fans that aren't me love these generations, and this will be an extremely tough battle for somebody who likes these games. So you have the floor. Tell me why one should beat the other.
I'll tell you which one will beat the other, but I forget which one this specific mechanic is, and
I'll
that
tell you.
is the extra post-game content.
That's mostly a Diamond and Pearl thing. I think
Okay.
that Ruby Sapphire, I don't think have a whole lot of post-game stuff in the original. Emerald, of course, does. Emerald has what is it called? Battle Tower, I want to say is
Yes.
introduced in
I'm
Emerald.
not talking about Battle Tower, though. I'm talking about the specific mechanic where I believe time travel was involved. And
Time travel.
I want to say that was Diamond and Pearl because of Palkia and Dalkia.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Here's why I don't know that. I never finished Diamond and Pearl.
Oh no, that's a point against it.
I didn't, like I said, it was too hard and I never went back to finish it. I just got stuck in, I think I'm like right before the final gym. I got stuck in this like area where I was climbing a mountain and it was just so hard and I didn't want to grind. I was 16. I was just like, I had other things I needed to do, you know? I had a social life. And then I
What?
was like, I can't just sit here grinding on my DS this whole time. Don't think about that too hard. Uh, So yeah, that's why I wanted you to kind of give your opinion here because I didn't even finish Gen 4 because of how much I struggled with that generation.
I mean, I have specific love for Rayquaza and Emerald specifically. It's
Sure.
one of the games that I would emulate on my computer when I had an old computer.
Oh God.
And more so,
We're talking about illicit activities on this podcast. How dare we?
oh, you're talking about grinding on that.
Different kind of illicit activity.
But yeah, I love Emerald and its design. I also loved Crystal and its design. It's the two games that I played um, emulated. Not so much
Mhm.
that of Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. That being
Oh yeah.
said, though,
Yeah.
Giratina as a Pokemon, as a concept, as a direct influence in the world, rivals that of Arceus and what Arceus does in Black and White 1 and 2. I
Wow.
think the
Okay.
Pokemon in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum have more sway and more pull than Kyogre does, even though
Yeah.
Kyogre's basically like permanent meta in the Pokemon Battles Championship games.
Yeah, he comes back, keeps coming back in the culture too. Like
Yep.
he's a big part of the new Pokemon Horizons anime.
Hmm.
Like Kyogre will not go away. So yeah, but and also I think it's hard to ignore the fan reaction. As much as we are talking about our own personal experiences, part of this bracket is to talk about the overall impact of these games.
Hmm.
And I think it would be remiss for us not to mention just how much people love Gen 4, like we've talked
Yes.
about before. And it's very telling that the reaction to the remakes, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I think part of why they were so negative is because of how much love people have for those original games. And being a DS game compared to a Game Boy Advance game does actually play here because as much as we want to remember the GBA as being a very successful platform, it does not hold a candle to the DS. The DS is overwhelmingly popular. The DS only recently got bested by the Switch as Nintendo's best-selling platform. Only recently. We're talking about almost 20 years of console life between the DS launch and when that number
Hmm.
got bested of reigning as the top best-selling platform Nintendo has ever manufactured. That's crazy. And so imagine the people who played Diamond and Pearl. I can imagine that the people who played Diamond and Pearl way outnumber the people who played and care about Ruby and Sapphire. The impact of Gen 4 is undeniable, especially the way the mechanics introduced. Sure, Ruby and Sapphire gives you double battles, but Diamond and Pearl, like I mentioned, literally change how attacks work
Hmm.
and forever change the battles in the Pokemon series.
No,
For
you're
better or
right.
for
Yeah,
worse, who knows?
for better or for worse. But yeah, you've sold me on Diamond, Pearl,
it's
Platinum.
hard it's hard not to argue for him because in comparison it takes everything that Gen 3 did and makes it bigger and arguably better and harder, but
Yep.
that's none of my business.
Right. And this is why at the very beginning we said don't worry about the numbers where these are
Yeah,
bracketed because we have a 9 seed versus 12 seed and a 14 seed versus a 10 seed.
yeah, don't think about it as a seeding, just think about it, here they are because they
Yes.
earned it. So
And
we are in the
I'm
semis.
we're in the semis and I'm kind of happy the way this
Mhm.
randomized turned out because we're
Yeah,
able to talk about in those quarterfinals very similar games coming out at very similar times. Not so much
yeah.
here in the semifinals.
No, but what's interesting here is that you have parallels here, where like
Mhm.
I think these are interesting because you can view them as similar moments in the Pokemon franchise. We'll get there, but let's start with our first matchup.
Yep, we'll talk with the top here with Black and White 1 and 2 versus Sun and Moon and Ultra version.
I love this matchup because, like I
Hmm.
said, similar moments in the franchise. With Black and White, you had it following Diamond and Pearl, which were very much just like extensions of what they were doing with Gen 3. Instead, Game Freak takes Black and White and brings it to like prove what the DS can do. Like they're like, we're going to take advantage of the 3D engine here by changing the graphics of the battles. We're going to take advantage of the space that we have to make a bigger experience and more impressive experience. There are cutscenes in this game for the first time. It opens with a cutscene. It's crazy. So they're taking advantage of the horsepower of the system that they have. Similarly, Sun and Moon follows X and Y and takes everything X and Y did and then redoes it and renovates the franchise in a similar way that they did with Black and White. So I think that both of these are examples of Game Freak being like, well, we did the easy, like the intro version of this experience. Let's pull out all the stops. Let's take this concept as far as we can and really change what Pokemon games can be. And I think both these games do that and are why they're both here. because they're both incredibly important entries and generations in the Pokemon franchise.
Right, but Sun and Moon does one thing that we have not talked about yet that I think separates it from Black and White and pretty much
Oh,
all other games, and a feature that we haven't mentioned, but becomes will a will be so integral in Pokemon games going forward, and that is regional variants.
that's true.
Alola regional variants, specifically Alolan Vulpixes, became so goddamn popular and introduced regional variants going forward into the Galarian variants, the Hisuian variants, and wherever the hell we're at now variants. That starts with Sun
Yeah,
and Moon, taking Pokemon that you know and you love and saying, we'll put a twist on it.
yeah, yeah, and both
Ex
have
giant executors.
yes, hell yes. I love that executor. It's so cool. Yeah, no, there's a lot to love about Sun and Moon vibes wise. I think honestly, if this was just about vibes, obviously Sun and Moon wins. But
Yes.
we're not talking about just about vibes. The impact is also what we have to consider here. And like I said, I think when you zoom out, it's harder for Sun and Moon to when just talking about how big of a deal Black and White was and how innovative that look and feel was at the time. And it was kind of the first time I think a lot of people saw Pokemon as aging with the times. Like before that, it had kind of a reputation of, not being super modern. With Black and White, even the trainers looked older for the first time. These weren't 10-year-olds you were controlling anymore. Sun and Moon, you're playing as a 10-year-old, let's be real. So it's like, and of course, this is when we talk about story again. When you compare the stories, it's really, really hard, again, to argue for Sun and Moon. Despite all the, like you said, with the Ultra Dimensions and with the Lily storyline, Black and White still is the best story in the series. It's hard to say that it doesn't.
I know.
Um,
The Alolan variant was my ace in the hole for Sun and Moon.
and you're
I
not
held it
wrong.
back and said, like,
Yeah.
it becomes a staple going forward.
And let's be honest, Sun and Moon, the reason why it got this far,
Mhm.
they're very impressive games, especially looking back. I think at the time I didn't appreciate them as much as I should have. What we were getting, I think part of that was just because I was mad that they were harder than next one. But I did finish Sun and Moon. I will say I didn't finish Black and White. But again, that's a me problem and
Mhm.
doesn't affect this bracket. But yeah, I do think that yeah, Black and White maybe has the bigger impact as a Pokemon game culturally. Sun and Moon, though, let's be honest, again, like they're important for their own reasons. They're interesting. One of the most interesting for sure Pokemon entries, and it's worth being as far as like as the semifinals. And I think it earned its spot. But yes, it's probably Black and White here.
Yeah, I think, like I said, cultural impact that Black and White has
Yeah,
puts it ahead.
yeah.
All right, now the big
Oh
boys
God,
here.
this
All
is
right,
hard.
this is the hard one. This is the kill your children. This is the
Yeah.
put your biases aside, put all your
Yes.
uh, look at the games themselves. Gold, silver, and crystal versus diamond, pearl, and platinum.
Yeah, you said put your biases aside, and that's ultimately going to be very hard for me to do here. I've
Yes,
established how I feel
very,
about
very
Gen
hard here.
4. Yeah, it's very hard for me to not just go ahead and pick gold and silver, just because of how much that generation means
Mhm.
to me. So
So we're
yeah,
gonna pick
that
it.
makes this
We're just gonna pick it.
extremely
This is just
hard.
and just not talk about
Well,
it.
yeah, but we can't not talk about it because
I
yes,
mean, we
if
could.
I'm
This is
going to
our
use the same
podcast.
argument I just used, though, I don't know because Diamond and Pearl again. Because consider the moments here. Like
Mhm.
I do think that these are similar in what they're doing with the franchise. Gold, Silver, Crystal. They're taking what the foundation of Red and Blue and making it bigger, better, and honestly, maybe even perfecting that original streamlined Pokemon experience. Diamond and Pearl, similarly, are taking the cheeky ground of Ruby and Sapphire. They did a lot of things right, but also introduced a lot of things that weren't super refined yet and refines them to like a fine powder. Like it is amazing how streamlined and refined Diamond and Pearl are, especially in the original
Mhm.
incarnations. There's a reason why fans love it. Just because I didn't love it does not mean does not take any points away from it, I believe. I think that there's a reason why these are arguably the most popular games in the series and why people were begging for a remake before we got a bad one.
Right.
So
But
yeah,
you care, we're not talking about the remakes here. Yes, they're
right.
influential to make the remakes, and yes, the Heart Gold Soul Silver remake is way better than the
Yeah.
Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about those remake games. We're talking about the original games when they came out for Game Boy Color and DS,
Yeah.
respectively.
And yeah, it's the thing is that you can't go back in time, and I think that hurts Gold and Silver's chances.
Hmm.
Because similar to what I was talking about Ruby to Red and Blue earlier, there are probably are very old feeling now. There's a lot that probably holds up about those experiences, but it would be really hard to go back to those if you're a modern Pokemon player. Like, and in a way that maybe Diamond and Pearl aren't. Diamond and Pearl established so much modern Pokemon mechanics that they do feel probably way more modern. And yeah, as much as I love Johto and the vibes of that game and what they introduced, again, it feels like an uphill battle a little bit to argue against Diamond and Pearl,
Uh,
as much as I love it.
yes, it is definitely an uphill battle. There's a reason Diamond and Pearl consistently rank atop most charts as the best
Mhm.
Pokemon games in the series. All that being said, we do, as I said at the beginning, have certain love and fondness for kind of those first games that you play. For me,
Yeah,
it was Pokemon Gold, and it was the journey, and like I said, the second journey back through Kanto as well. That there's a whole lot that even Crystal, like I said, refines this journey, refines everything, and has a lot of those mainstays going forward.
quick aside, I'm curious. You mentioned gold. We should go down and say which versions we played because that'd be
Yeah.
really interesting. I wonder if we're opposite every time. So I did red.
Oh yeah, I did blue.
Huh. I did silver.
Yeah, I did gold.
You did gold. I did ruby.
I did ruby as well because it was rare.
Okay. All right. Well, fair.
Almost.
Uh, I did diamond.
I did pearl.
I did what's next? Oh, I did the white.
um, I think I did white too.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right. Fair. I did Y.
and then I did X, and then
Okay.
yeah, I did sun. You did moon.
And I did moon, yeah.
Yeah, and then I did scarlet. You did violet.
Wait, we skipped it, but I think I did shield.
Yeah, and I did sword.
So yeah, we're mostly opposites except for a couple,
Yeah.
which is fascinating. Wow. I don't know what that says about us. It's like you can have horoscopes, but we have Pokemon person. All right. Anyway, I was just curious. So yeah, back to this. So I think ultimately this hinges on something we need to establish. Are we picking this final on the games that like are making the this is our bracket argument and saying that the games that mean the most to us? Or are we trying to be objective here and picking the objective best Pokemon game?
I think we were trying to be personal and throw our biases into here. Sun and Moon would have moved on, just like Gold and Silver would have
Yeah,
moved on, and then we would have had a Tropius versus Ampharos finale here.
right. Because yeah, I'll be honest, I've been trying to be more universal and objective here,
Hmm.
and that's kind of how I've been playing this.
Yes.
So yeah, okay. Just wanted to make that clear what we were doing.
Yeah.
So yes, in that case, Diamond and Pearl does move on,
Yeah.
which
Which
means our
means
final.
if you called this at the very beginning, congratulations. You're
It's
better than
this is
at
the
this and
battle of
us.
the this is of course was always going to be the battle of the DS games. This is
Yep.
of course the fan battle, the eternal argument, which is Black and White versus Diamond Pearl, Gen 4 versus Gen 5.
Hmm.
And it's a really tough one. I honestly don't know where I go here.
And
There's
we
a lot
can,
to be said.
I don't think we can say tie, they both win.
Yeah, no, we can't, unfortunately. This isn't the Oscars. There's no ties here. This isn't spring training baseball. Come on. We're
Yes,
in the
this,
extra innings,
yes.
baby.
No, no soccer
Um,
here.
yeah. Okay, so to me, just on face value, this. really these games are very similar, except for two crucial changes in black and white. The graphical style, whether you think that's an improvement or a not improvement from Diamond and Pearl's simpler style, and the story. Whether you think the story strength in black and white is enough to overcome Diamond and Pearl. I think those are the two X factors here, because otherwise, this is a pretty neck and neck battle.
I think Black and White, as its own contained story, the Pokemon Company found a way to
Mhm.
tell additional stories with that time jump in creating a sequel. The only one that did got give a sequel here. It is kind of unfair that this is really two separate games going against
Yeah.
a singular game in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum.
You're
When
not
we're looking at
wrong,
Black and
but
White as a whole, both games, beginning to
you're
end.
not wrong. However, I think you're underestimating Platinum and how big of a package that is and how all-encompassing that is in the Pokemon fandom. Like, I think that a lot of Pokemon fans would say there is enough to do in Platinum that it doesn't matter if you have Black and White 2, because Platinum is all you need. That's a feast. That is a Pokemon buffet. You are just like, nom 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 nomming until you can't handle it anymore.
Oh, I know. And it's got a lot of mainstay established Pokemon continuously going through the meta, continuously going through just always popping up in the subsequent games
Yeah.
after it that they don't have to include Pokemon from these two specific generations,
Right.
but they do. But they keep popping up, and it's not more than just because they're fan favorites too, because they
Yeah.
fit within each region, within each biome, that
So, yeah.
adding them flows well.
So I'll tell you where I'm sitting here. I do find myself, my heart, my emotions, my soul, leaning a little towards black and white here because I think it's the cooler win. And also, I want to honor just the big swing they took with the story. But a point in Diamond and Pearl's favor here, and it dovetails with what you just talked about, is the legacy. There's a reason why Legends Arceus is the Sinnoh region, and they have not revisited Unova. The Pokemon Company also must have deep fondness and nostalgia for Gen 4, and they've proven it over and over again, like you said, with the inclusion of those Pokemon over and over again. And I do think that them being the first DS entry at the peak of like end of like the DS gaining steam, it was 2006. You have to remember is around the time that the DS really came into its own. It technically launched in late 2004, but it was a little kind of a weird device at first. And it didn't really become the DS that we know it as until when you get into late 2005 and 2006 with the release of Diamond and Pearl. It pushed that system into the stratosphere. So I think legacy wise, there's a reason why I think Game Freak loves it and why the fans love it. But like I said, my brain and my heart are split, is what I'm saying. I think my brain says this is Diamond and Pearl just because people won't shut up about it, and there's got to be a reason why. And my soul heart says black and white just because of how impressive those games were at the time. And looking back, just how, like, again, big of a swing they took on something that they weren't sure was going to work and resonate with the fans as much as it did. But ultimately, part of me also says, I don't have a horse in this race because these are the two games on this list that I did not finish.
Right, and the two games that we both have personal favorites died in the semifinals.
Yeah. So, so yeah, I do think that, yeah, I'm gonna have to maybe leave this to you because as I said, my heart is really with black and white. I think that's a cool win. I think that feels like the media boat choice over the two. But ultimately, if we are doing this objectively,
And
I
whenever we ever
don't
being
know.
traditional here,
Yeah, I don't know really. Like, I don't know if I can pick it just based on what we've talked about.
I think that I'll say it again here, that extra post-game content, that even after you finish the main story, that there's so much more additional content in Diamond and specifically Platinum here,
Yeah,
that there
platinum.
is so much more to do in Platinum that it also, because of the DS, allowed you to trade way more easily for the first time in the series and became way more easy to do so going forward from here. And essentially, I think it's the as furthest back as you can go for Pokemon Home to bring your Pokemon with you. that I think I we need to award it to Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Because
Yeah,
Pokemon Home is one thing we're not talking about here because it's
no.
like you said, like with Pokemon Go, this kind of like overarching thing that's just like hovering, saying like you all belong within me.
Yeah.
But you all kind of started with those Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum games being able
Yeah.
to make it into home.
There's a lot you can say about Diamond and Pearl being the start of modern Pokemon. Like that is a division. That is a dividing line. Everything before it is probably very old feeling, and then everything after it brings us where we're at now. So yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think it makes a lot of sense for this to win.
All right, I'm good putting Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum as our victor.
All right. Congratulations to Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, the DS games released in 2006, for winning our Pokemon 30th anniversary
20
games
years
bracket.
later, and you're still rocking it.
Yes. Still doing it. So yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that was a pretty strong tournament. Although in my heart, congratulations, Heart Gold Soul Silver.
Yes, although we all know the true winner here, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Coliseum.
Yeah, maybe we revisit this someday and do the spin-offs because Pokemon Pinball, our great winner. No,
Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket. You have my vote.
although I think that maybe we need to, before we do that, we'll probably have to play Pokopia because it seems like that is going to give a lot of those games a run
Oh
for its
yeah,
money.
Pokopia is
So
not even on here because it's not really a mainline game.
no,
You're
it's
playing
not
as
a
a
mainline
kiddo.
game, technically. So
Yes.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for that wonderful Pokemon journey that we just went on. That was our March Madness for 2026.
It was shorter
Um,
than most other podcasts that we normally do.
you know what? Like, that's fine. That's fitting in a way. We just like in and out, getting this stuff done, just like a good Pokemon battle.
Yep.
So, yeah, thanks for joining us. Congratulations to Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And we'll be back with a regular show this coming week. Watch your podcast feeds wherever you listen to our show or watch on YouTube. Search Media Boat Podcast if you don't know where those are, because you'll find us that way. And in the
And
meantime, go
if
play
you
some
want,
Pokemon games.
yeah, and or if you want to listen to our previous March Madness brackets,
You can
just
find them.
find you can find them. Just search Media Boat March Madness, and they will appear. You want to hear us talk our tails off about Taylor Swift songs? Go right ahead. Best Picture
Yeah.
winners, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Video game franchises, go right ahead. We'll have Pokemon in there as well.
Yeah, it's true. So look back to the archives, have some fun, but most importantly, have a good day and enjoy. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yep. Thank you for listening to us, and we'll
Hmm.
be back with, I'll say, more news, more thoughts, and more of us. But if you're
Yeah.
listening to the future, and I'm sure you are, you can do all of that right now.
All right. Bye.
All right, bye.